At the Albright Winter Gala, a single cutting remark ignites a reckoning. When a waiter takes the stage, he doesn't just speak, he shatters the illusion of privilege. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The ballroom of the Albright estate sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the flash of diamonds. It was that time of year again, the Albright Winter Gala, when the richest and most powerful people on the East Coast gathered to pretend they cared about charity, while really just showing off their wealth. Celeste Albright stood at the center of it all, a vision in a white designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders in perfect waves, and her smile dazzled everyone who approached. At 25, she was already a fixture in society magazines and the darling of New York's elite. "Celeste, darling, the gala is absolutely magnificent this year," gushed Vivian Montgomery, wife of a banking executive. "You've outdone yourself." Celeste accepted the compliment with practiced grace. "Thank you, Vivian. We're hoping to raise twice as much as last year for children's education." That was the official cause of the night, though Celeste couldn't remember the last time she'd actually visited any of the schools they supposedly supported. Her father handled those details. Her job was to look perfect and charm the donors. "More champagne, ladies?" A tall, handsome black man in a crisp server's uniform approached with a tray of flutes. His voice was deep and smooth, his posture straight and dignified. "Yes, thank you," said Vivian, taking a glass. Celeste barely glanced at him as she reached for her drink, but something made her pause. The way he carried himself, perhaps, not servile like the other waitstaff. There was something in his eyes, intelligence, awareness, and maybe a hint of judgment that made her suddenly self-conscious. As he moved away, Senator Harrison Blackwell joined their circle, along with his wife and Celeste's father, William Albright. "What a turnout," the senator said, surveying the room. "The Albright Winter Gala remains the event of the season." William Albright, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, nodded with satisfaction. "When you create TR Edition, people respect it. We've been hosting this gala for 25 years now." "Speaking of tradition," Mrs. Blackwell said, lowering her voice, "I couldn't help but notice some changes in the staff this year." Celeste followed her gaze to the tall waiter who had served them champagne. He was now across the room, expertly navigating between guests. "That one, for example," Mrs. Blackwell continued with a small sniff. "He seems rather confident. For his position, doesn't he?" Celeste felt several pairs of eyes turn to her, waiting for her response. These were her father's friends, donors, important people. What they wanted was reassurance that the social order remained intact, that the help knew their place. She felt a flicker of discomfort, but quickly pushed it aside. This was her world. These were her people. "Oh, him?" Celeste said, with a dismissive wave and a practiced laugh. "He's just a white hair, nothing worth noting." The group chuckled, tension dissolved. But as the words left her mouth, Celeste noticed the waiter had paused mid-step, close enough to have heard every word. For a split second, their eyes met. His face remained impassive, professional, but something flickered in his gaze, a wound quickly masked. He continued serving, moving through the crowd with that same quiet dignity. Celeste felt a strange twist in her stomach, but the conversation had already moved on to stock prices and vacation homes. The moment passed, forgotten by everyone except her and him. Miles Duval adjusted his bow tie in the service corridor and took a deep breath. Just 3 more hours, he reminded himself. 3 more hours of smiling at people who looked through him, of pretending not to hear their condescending remarks, of being furniture instead of a person. "You okay, man?" asked Ricky, another server Gray beaming a fresh tray of appetizers. "Yeah," Miles said, straightening his shoulders. "Just taking a minute." The truth was, he wasn't okay. The blonde woman's casual dismissal still stung, not because it was unusual, but because it was so typical. Just a waiter, as if that summed up his entire existence. "That Albright girl is something else, huh?" Ricky said, nodding toward the ballroom. "Pretty, but you can tell she's never had to worry about a thing in her life." Miles gave a non-committal shrug. Let's just get through the night. I need this job." And he did. The hospital bills were piling up, and his father's condition wasn't improving. After the stroke, Leonard Duval, once a proud high school principal, needed round-the-clock care. The insurance covered some, but not nearly enough. So here was Miles, Columbia graduate and published writer, serving champagne to people who thought he was nothing worth no ting. He picked up a fresh tray and pushed through the swinging door, back into the glittering ballroom. As he circulated, Miles couldn't help but listen to snippets of conversation. Stock portfolios, real estate investments, political connections, the same topics, the same people, congratulating themselves on their success while sipping champagne that cost more than what he made in an hour. He spotted Celeste Albright across the room, now talking to a group of young socialites. She laughed at something, the sound carrying across the ballroom. Despite himself, Miles noticed how her whole face lit up when she laughed genuinely, different from the polite smile she wore like armor the rest of the time. "May I have everyone's attention, please?" William Albright had taken the small stage where a jazz quartet had been playing. The music stopped and the room quieted. "First, I want to thank you all for your continued support of the Albright Foundation. Tonight we've already raised over $2 million for children's education initiatives." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. "Now, as is our tradition, we'll open the floor for a few words. Anyone who wishes to share a toast, a story, or simply express gratitude, please feel free to come up." Miles watched as several guests took turns at the microphone. A bank CEO praised the Albrights for their philanthropy. A society matron shared an anecdote about meeting Celeste as a child. A politician made a joke about tax breaks that had the crowd chuckling. And then, something strange happened. Miles felt himself moving forward, cutting through the crowd toward the stage. It wasn't planned, it wasn't even a conscious decision. But suddenly, he was handing his tray to a startled Ricky and walking toward the microphone. A murmur rippled through the crowd as he climbed the steps to the stage. He saw William Albright's confused expression, saw security take a step forward, then hesitate. Miles reached the microphone. The room fell silent, then erupted in nervous laughter. A waiter speaking at the Albright Gala. Surely this was some planned entertainment. He looked out at the sea of faces, curious, amused, dismissive. His eyes found Celeste, who was staring at him with parted lips and wide eyes, a flush spreading across her cheeks. Miles took a breath and began to speak. "Good evening. My name is Miles Duval. I'm just a waiter tonight, but I'd like to tell you a story." His voice was rich and confident, the voice of someone used to having words matter. The room stilled. Once, there was a woman born into so much privilege that she never had to look beyond the walls of her perfect world. And once there was a man who had to fight for every opportunity, who had to be twice as good to get half as far. Miles paused, his eyes sweeping the room. No one was laughing now. Their worlds were separated by money, by history, by assumptions. She never had to wonder if doors would open for her, they just did. He never walked into a room without being aware of how he was perceived, what was assumed about him before he spoke a single word. In the silence, Miles could hear the soft clink of ice in glasses, the subtle shifting of Size's inexpensive clothes. She believed that a person's worth was tied to their status. A CEO mattered, a senator mattered, but a waiter was nothing worth noting. Celeste flinched visibly, her gaze locked on him. What she didn't know, what so many of us don't know about each other, is that every person carries a universe inside them. Every person has a story worth hearing. Miles's voice softened, becoming more intimate, as if he were speaking to each person individually. The waiter she dismissed? He was once a writer whose words moved people to tears. He was a son who read poetry to his father, a high school principal who believed education could change lives. He was a man who had loved and lost, who had dreams derailed but not destroyed. Tears welled in the eyes of several guests. An older woman in the front dabbed at her face with a napkin. The line between us, between having everything and having to fight for anything, is thinner than we think. A sudden illness, a market crash, a twist of fate. And suddenly, the person who never had to worry is desperate. and the person who was invisible becomes essential. Miles looked directly at Celeste now, his gaze steady. So the next time you decide someone is nothing worth noting, remember this: there but for fortune go you. And maybe, just maybe, take a moment to ask their name, to see them, really see them. Because the greatest privilege isn't wealth, it's the luxury of being truly seen. He stepped back from the microphone. For a heartbeat, there was complete silence. Then, someone began to applaud. Another joined in, and another. Soon, the entire ballroom was filled with the sound of applause, some reluctant, some enthusiastic, all stunned. Miles nodded once, then descended the steps and walked back through the crowd, which parted for him like the Red Sea. He didn't look at Celeste again as he pushed through the service door and disappeared. Celeste couldn't breathe. Her chest felt tight, her face hot with shame and something else she couldn't name. Around her, guests were murmuring, some clearly uncomfortable, others visibly moved. Well, that was inappropriate, her father said tightly, appearing at her side. I'll have him fired immediately. No, Celeste said more forcefully than she intended to. No, Dad, don't. William Albright raised an eyebrow. He embarrassed us, Celeste. He embarrassed you. No, she said more quietly. I embarrassed myself. Before her father could respond, Celeste turned and made her way through the crowd, ignoring the curious looks and whispered comments. She needed air. She needed to think. Outside, the December air was bracingly cold. Celeste wrapped her arms around herself, her thin gown offering little protection against the chill. The gala continued behind her, music and laughter spilling out whenever someone opened the doors. But it all seemed hollow now, like a play she'd been performing in without realizing it. You shouldn't be out here without a coat, it's freezing. Celeste turned to find Miles standing a few feet away. He'd removed his bow tie and server's jacket, replacing it with a worn but stylish peacoat. He was holding a duffel bag. Clearly he'd been fired or quit after his speech. I'm sorry, she blurted out. What I said was cruel and wrong. Miles studied her for a long moment. I don't need your guilt, he said finally, but I'd accept your honesty. Honesty? Celeste repeated, confused. Yes, honesty about why someone like you feels the need to make someone like me smaller. What does it give you? The question hit Celeste like a physical blow. No one had ever spoken to her this way, directal why, without deference or flattery. I don't know, she admitted, her voice small. I've never thought about it. That's the problem, isn't it? Miles said, not unkindly. You've never had to think about it. A car pulled up. Not a sleek town car like the ones waiting for the gala guests, but a modest Uber. Miles moved toward it. Wait, Celeste called. Please, I need to... Miles paused, looking back at her. You need to what? Celeste realized she had no idea. Apologize again? Ask for forgiveness? Learn his story? I don't know, she said again, honestly. But I want to. Something in her voice must have reached him, because Miles's expression softened slightly. He pulled a small notebook from his coat pocket, wrote something on a page, tore it out, and handed it to her. My number, he said. If you're serious about wanting to understand, call me, but not if this is just about making yourself feel better. He got into the car and drove away, leaving Celeste standing in the cold, clutching the piece of paper like a lifeline. The next morning, Celeste sat in her penthouse apartment, still in her pajamas at noon, staring at her phone. Miles's number was entered, but not yet dialed. She'd been sitting like this for 20 minutes. Her phone buzzed with a text, making her jump. It was her friend Alessandra. OMG, have you seen this? It's all over Twitter. There was a link attached. With a sense of dread, Celeste clicked it. It was a video of Miles's speech from last night. Someone had recorded it and posted it online. The caption read, Waiter puts socialite in her place at fancy gala. Watch till the end. The video already had thousands of views and shares. Celeste felt sick. Not because she was being criticized. The comments were actually split, with some people praising Miles's eloquence and others defending the social hierarchy. But because this intimate, raw moment had been turned into viral entertainment. Her phone rang. It was her father. Celeste, we need to do damage control. This video, I know, Dad, I just saw it. I'm having our PR team prepare a statement. We'll say the waiter was disgruntled, that he misunderstood. No, Celeste interrupted. We're not going to lie. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Excuse me? Her father rarely raised his voice, but his quiet tone was more threatening. He wasn't wrong, Dad. What I said was cruel. And his speech, it made people think. It made me think. William Albright sighed heavily. Celeste, you're not thinking clearly. This man publicly humiliated our family at our own event. He has to be dealt with. His name is Miles, Celeste said firmly. Miles Duval. And I'm going to talk to him. She hung up before her father could argue further. Taking a deep breath, Celeste pressed the call button. Miles answered on the third ring. Hello? It's Celeste. Albright, she added unnecessarily. About the video. I'm sorry. I had nothing to do with it being posted. I know, Miles said after a pause. I figured it was one of the guests. Are you okay? I mean, with it being out there like that? Another pause. I've gotten some interesting calls this morning, a few journalists, a literary agent. Oh? Celeste wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Miles, I'd like to meet. To talk. Properly. This time the silence stretched so long that Celeste thought he might have hung up. Why? He finally asked. Because I can't stop thinking about what you said, about being seen, about the line between us being thinner than we think. I want to understand. I want to see you, really see you. She held her breath, waiting. There's a coffee shop called E. Ferryday Grounds on West 96th, Miles said at last. I'll be there at 2. If you're serious, I'll see you then. The line went dead. Celeste looked at the time. It was 12:30. She had an hour and a half to figure out what on earth she was going to say to the man she had dismissed as nothing worth noting. The man who had made her feel more in one evening than she had in years. The man who somehow had already changed her life. Everyday Grounds was nothing, like the upscale cafes Celeste usually frequented. No marble countertops or crystal light fixtures here, just worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and the rich aroma of coffee. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and a few students sat hunched over laptops. Celeste had changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans, a simple sweater, and minimal makeup. She didn't want to arrive looking like she was trying too hard, or worse, like she was slummy nugget. Still, she felt painfully out of place as she pushed open the door, acutely aware of her designer boots and the expensive watch on her wrist. Miles was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 mugs. He wore a navy button-down shirt and khakis. Simple, but he looked good, dignified. When he saw her, he didn't smile, but he stood up politely. You came, he said, his tone neutral. I said I would. Celeste slid into the chair across from him. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Miles gestured to the second mug. I ordered you tea. I noticed you didn't drink coffee at the gala. Celeste blinked, surprised. You noticed that? I notice a lot of things. It's part of being invisible to people like you. It gives you a chance to observe. The comment stung, but Celeste knew she deserved it. I guess I deserve that. This isn't about what you deserve, Miles said, his voice softening slightly. It's about seeing beyond our bubbles, both of us. Celeste wrapped her hands around the warm mug. The video of your speech, it's everywhere. My father wants to issue a statement painting you as a disgruntled employee. Miles's jaw tightened. And what do you want? I want to know your story. The real one. She met his gaze directly. You said you were a writer. Something flickered in Miles's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she had actually listened, had remembered. I was. Still am, I suppose, though I haven't published anything in a while. What do you write? Essays, mainly. Short fiction. I had a collection published by a small press a few years ago. It did well in literary circles, won a regional award. He shrugged. Nothing that would put me on your radar. What was it called? Invisible Lines. A small, ironic smile played at his lips. Fitting, isn't it? Celeste felt herself blushing. And what happened? Why aren't you writing now? Miles took a sip of his coffee before answering. Life happened. My father had a stroke 2 years ago. He needed care and the medical bills started piling up. Writing doesn't pay the bills, so I took whatever jobs I could find. Your father? You mentioned he was a Princey pal? Miles nodded, and his expression softened. 30 years at Roosevelt High in Harlem. He believed education was the great equalizer. Pushed me to go to Columbia to pursue writing. His voice caught slightly. He was my biggest supporter. Was. Is, Miles corrected himself. But since the stroke, he's different. Can't speak clearly anymore. The man who once commanded a room full of teenagers can barely feed himself now. The raw pain in his voice made Celeste's chest tighten. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, be aware. There are millions of people like me out there. Educated, capable people working service jobs because life dealt them a bad hand. Not because they're nothing worth noting. Celeste flinched. I shouldn't have said that. I was trying to fit in, to say what I thought people expected me to say. That's the problem, isn't it? We all get trapped in these roles. You, the perfect socialite, me, the invisible server. But we're so much more than the boxes people put us in. Celeste found herself nodding. I've never thought about it that way, about how much of what I do and say is just performing. For the first time, Miles's expression truly softened. Tell me something real about you, Celeste. Something that isn't in your society page bio. Celeste hesitated. No one had ever asked her that before. What was real about her beneath the polished exterior? I hate those galas, she admitted. I hate most of the events I attend. The same people, the same conversations, everyone trying to one-up each other while pretending to care about charity. Miles looked surprised. Then why do you do it? It's expected. Family tradition. The Albright name means something, and I'm supposed to uphold it. She traced the rim of her mug with her finger. My mother died when I was 12, cancer. After tea, my father became obsessed with our family legacy, with me carrying it on. The foundation, the gala, my social position, it's all part of that. I'm sorry about your mother, Miles said quietly. Thank you. Celeste found herself blinking back unexpected tears. When was the last time she'd talked about her mother? It was a long time ago. Loss stays with you, though. Shapes you. Miles's gaze was thoughtful. Is that why you do what your father wants? Because you're afraid of losing him too? The question hit too close to home. Celeste felt exposed, vulnerable. I don't know. Maybe. She straightened her shoulders. What about you? Your speech last night, was it planned? Miles shook his head. Completely spontaneous. When Mr. Albright opened the floor, something just snapped in me. I was tired of being invisible, tired of people like... He hesitated. People like me, Celeste finished for him. Yes, but I didn't expect it to go viral. I didn't even know someone was recording. Are you sorry it happened? Miles considered this. No, he said finally. I'm not. For once I said exactly what I was thinking, and people listened. Their conversation continued, moving from personal histories to books they'd read, places they'd visited. To Celeste's surprise, they had both loved the same obscure novel, had both visited the same small museum in Montreal. Despite their different backgrounds, there were unexpected points of connection. 2 hours passed before either of them realized it. When Celeste finally checked her watch, she was shocked. I should go, she said reluctantly. I have a... thing tonight. Another gala? Miles asked, a hint of his earlier edge returning. A dinner at the Met. I'm on the Young Patrons Board. She hesitated. Would you want to meet again? Maybe go for a walk in Central Park, Sunday afternoon? Miles studied her for a long moment. Why, Celeste? Is this about making yourself feel better about what happened? No, she said firmly. It's about wanting to know more. About you. About seeing beyond my bubble, like you said. After a pause that felt eternal, Miles nodded. Sunday at 2, by the Bethesda fountain. The next few days passed in a blur for Celeste. She went through the motions of her usual life, The dinner at the Met, a brunch with friends, a meeting about the Foundation's next initiative, but her mind kept drifting to Miles. Her own father, meanwhile, was furious that she had refused to let their PR team handle the waiter situation, as he called it. "The video has over 1 million views now, Celeste," William Albright said during an uncomfortable breakfast at his Upper East Side townhouse. "People are talking. Questions are being raised about our foundation, about our family." "Good," Celeste said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Maybe we need to be questioned. Maybe we need to look at how we treat people." William put down his coffee cup with a sharp clink. "This isn't like you, Celeste. One dramatic speech from some waiter, and suddenly you're questioning everything we stand for." "His name is Miles Duval, Dad. And yes, maybe I am questioning things. Is that so wrong?" "It is when it threatens what I've built, what your mother and I built together." The mention of her mother was a low blow, and they both knew it. Celeste stood up, her breakfast untouched. "Don't use Mom to manipulate me. She would have listened to what Miles said. She would have cared." She left before her father could respond, the slam of the front door punctuating her exit. Sunday arrived clear and cold. Celeste got to the Bethesda fountain 15 minutes early, too anxious to sit at home any longer. She paced the edge of the frozen fountain, watching families and couples stroll by, tourists taking photos of the famous angel statue. At exactly 2 o'clock, she spotted Miles walking toward her. He wore the same peacoat she'd seen the night of the gala, with a red scarf adding a touch of color. He looked good, confident, steady. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy. "Hi," he offered a small smile. "Ready to walk?" They set off along the path that circled the lake, now frozen over with a few brave skaters venturing onto the ice. For a while they walked in comfortable silence, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. "I've been thinking about what you said," Celeste finally spoke, "about the line between us being thinner than we think, about fortune and fate." Miles glanced at her. And you're right. I've never had to worry about money or opportunity. Doors have always opened for me. But that doesn't mean I'm happy." "I never said privilege equals happiness," Miles said. "Just that it provides a safety net most people don't have." "Like your father," Celeste said softly. "If he'd been wealthy, his stroke wouldn't have derailed your life." Miles nodded. "Exactly. One medical emergency, and everything changed. I had to drop my writing, take multiple jobs, move to a cheaper apartment." "Tell me about him, your father." Miles's face softened. "Leonard Duval. He is the kind of educator who changes lives. Strict but fair. He knew every student's name, their story, their potential. Kids who everyone else had given up on, he believed in them. He sounds wonderful. He is. Even now, even with his limitations, he has this presence, this dignity." Miles kicked at a stone on the path. "He hatters that I had to give up writing to care for him. Feels like he failed me somehow." "But he didn't," Celeste said. "You're still writing. Maybe not publishing, but the words you spoke that night. They were a writer's words, powerful, moving." Miles looked at her, surprised. "Thank you for saying that." They stopped at a bench overlooking the lake and sat down, watching the skaters. "Can I ask you something personal?" Celeste ventured. "You can ask. I might not answer." "That night at the gala, why did you agree to see me again? You could have just walked away." Miles was quiet for a long moment. "Something in your eyes," he finally said. "When I finished speaking, there was shock, yes, and shame, but also recognition. Like you were really seeing me. Maybe for the first time. But you were seeing me." Celeste felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with her heavy coat. "I am." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Celeste felt like the rest of the park, the city, the world, had fallen away. There was just this bench, this moment, this man whose words had somehow broken through the wall she hadn't even known she'd built. The moment was interrupted by Celeste's phone ringing. She glanced at it, her father, and declined the call. "Everything okay?" Miles asked. Just my dad. He's not happy about any of this." She gestured vaguely between them. "By this, you mean me meeting you, talking to you, defending you when the video went viral?" Miles raised an eyebrow. "You defended me?" Celeste nodded. "I refuse to let our PR team spin it or paint you as the villain. I told my father you were right. That couldn't have gone over well. It didn't. But for once I didn't care." She turned to face him fully. "Miles, I've spent my whole life doing what was expected of me, being who people wanted me to be. But ever since that night, something's changed. I can't go back to being that person." "And who do you want to be instead?" "I don't know yet, but I want to find out." Miles studied her face as if searching for something. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him because he nodded slowly. "I'd like to show you something," he said, "if you're up for it." "What is it?" "My father, I visit him every Sunday afternoon at the care facility. He's having a good day today. His nurse texted me earlier." Celeste felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. This was a big step meeting his father. It meant Miles was starting to trust her. "I'd be honored," she said sincerely. Miles stood and offered his hand to help her up. After a brief hesitation, Celeste took it. His hand was warm and strong around hers, and she found herself reluctant to let go when they started walking again. The Riverside Care Center wears a far cry from the luxury senior living facilities Celeste was familiar with. The building was clean but dated, with fluorescent lighting and linoleum floors that had seen better days. The staff seemed caring but clearly overworked, greeting Miles by name as he signed them in. "He's in the common room today," said a nurse with a kind smile. "Been looking forward to your visit." Miles led Celeste down a hallway to a large room where several residents were gathered. Some watched TV, others played cards or worked on puzzles. In a corner by the window sat an older man in a wheelchair, a book open on his lap. Even from a distance, Celeste could see the resemblance between father and son, the same strong jawline, the same thoughtful eyes. But where Miles was in his prime, Leonard Duval's body had betrayed him. One side of his face drooped slightly, and his right hand rested uselessly on the armrest. "Dad," Miles called softly as they approached. Leonard looked up, his face lighting up at the sight of his son. Then his gaze shifted to Celeste, and surprise replaced his smile. "Dad, this is Celeste Albright. Celeste, my father, Leonard Duval." Celeste stepped forward and extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Duval." Leonard took her hand with his left one, his grip surprisingly firm. "Al Albright?" he said, his speech slurred but understandable. "Like the gala?" Celeste glanced at Miles, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, that's my family. But I'm just Celeste today, if that's okay." Leonard studied her for a long moment, then gestured to the chairs beside him. "Sit, both of you." Miles pulled up chairs for Celeste and himself. "Dad's been reading Steinbeck again," he said, nodding at the book on Leonard's lap. "East of Eden," Leonard said, tapping the cover. "Rereading. Beautiful, beautiful words." "I haven't read that one," Celeste admitted. "You should," Leonard said, his eyes sharp despite his physical limitations. "All about choice. Good and evil. Not born into. Chosen." "Timshel," Miles said softly. "Thou mayest." It's Hebrew. In the book, it means humans have a choice. We can choose to overcome our circumstances, our heritage, even our nature. Leonard nodded vigorously. "Exactly. Timshel." Celeste felt the weight of the IR combined gaze, 2 generations of Duval men, both looking at her as if they could see right through her carefully constructed exterior to the uncertainty beneath. "I'd like to read it," she said. "Maybe you could recommend other books too, Mr. Duval." Leonard's face lit up, and he began listing titles, his speech becoming more fluid as his enthusiasm grew. Miles sat back, watching his father with a mixture of pride and sadness that made Celeste's heart ache. They spent an hour with Leonard, talking about books, about teaching, about New York. He asked Celeste questions about herself, real questions, not the superficial inquiries she was used to at social events. When she mentioned her mother's death, He reached out and patted her hand with genuine sympathy. As visiting hours came to an end, Leonard beckoned Miles closer and whispered something in his ear. Miles straightened up, a faint blush on his cheek. "What did he say?" Celeste asked when they were in the hallway after saying goodbye. Miles shook his head, looking embarrassed. "Nothing important." "Tell me," she insisted. Miles sighed. He said, "She sees you. Don't let that go." The simple words brought unexpected tears to Celeste's eyes. "He's right. I do see you, Miles, and I'm grateful that you're starting to see me too. The real me, not just the Albright heiress." Miles reached out, and after a moment's hesitation, wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gentle touch sent a shiver through her. "Would you like to get dinner?" he asked. "There's a good Ethiopian place a few blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but the food is amazing." "I'd love that," Celeste said, meaning it more than she'd meant anything in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Celeste and Miles continued to meet, for coffee, for walks, for meals at small neighborhood restaurants Miles introduced her to. Each time Celeste felt herself relaxing more, being more authentic, caring less about appearances and more about substance. Miles, too, began to soften toward her, to trust that her interest was genuine. He shared some of his unpublished writing with her, stories that moved her to tears with their beauty and insight. Celeste found herself thinking about him constantly, daydreaming about their conversations, looking forward to their next meeting with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. Was this what real connection felt like? This mixture of comfort and excitement, of being challenged and accepted at the same time? But as Celeste and Miles grew closer, the world around them was taking notice. The video of Miles's speech had sparked conversations about privilege and visibility, about who gets seen and who gets ignored. Some commentators praised Miles for his eloquence and courage. Others criticized him for attacking a young woman at her family's charitable event. And then, 3 weeks after their first coffee shop meeting, everything exploded. Celeste was having lunch with her friend Alessandra when her phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. Alessandra's phone was doing the same. "Oh my God," Alessandra said, scrolling through her feed. "Celeste, have you seen this?" She turned her phone around to show Celeste the headline, "Albright heiress and viral waiter, romance or redemption?" Below, it was a photo of Celeste and Miles walking through Central Park, their hands linked, her head tilted toward him in laughter. Celeste felt the blood drain from her face. "Where did they get that?" "It's everywhere," Alessandra said, her eyes wide. "Page 6, TMZ, social media. They're calling it a class-crossing romance and questioning whether it's genuine or just you doing damage control." Celeste's phone rang. Her father. She let it go to voicemail. Then Miles called and she answered immediately. "Have you seen it?" he asked without preamble, his voice tight. "Just now. Miles, I'm so sorry. I never thought—" "It's not your fault," he cut her off. "But this is exactly what I didn't want. To be turned into a spectacle, a stow-rye line." "I know. I understand." Celeste closed her eyes, trying to think. "We should talk in person. Can you meet me?" "Not today. I have a double shift and then I need to see my father. The nurses said he's upset about something." Miles's voice softened slightly. "Tomorrow, our usual coffee shop." "Yes, of course." Celeste felt a wave of relief that he still wanted to see her. "Miles, whatever happens, whatever people say, what's between us is real, at least for me." There was a pause, and when Miles spoke again, his voice was gentle. "For me too, Celeste. That's why I can't let it become a circus." After they hung up, Celeste turned to find Alessandra staring at her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You actually like him," Alessandra said, sounding surprised. "This isn't just so me PR stunt or rebellion against your dad." "Of course I like him," Celeste said defensively. "Miles is intelligent, kind, talented, and from a completely different world," Alessandra finished for her. "Sela, you know how this looks, right? The society princess and the waiter she once humiliated? It's like something out of a movie." "I don't care how it looks," Celeste said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew it wasn't entirely true. She did care, not about her reputation, but about how the publicity might hurt Miles, might cheapen what was growing between them. Her phone buzzed again, a text from her father. "Come to the house immediately. We need to talk." Celeste sighed and gathered her things. "I have to go. My father's summoning me." Alessandra squeezed her hand. "Good luck. And for what it's worth, I think it's kind of amazing, you and the waiter. Very romantic." "His name is Miles," Celeste corrected automatically, "and yes, it is." William Albright was pacing his study when Celeste arrived at his townhouse. The heavy wooden doors barely muffled the sound of his voice as he barked orders to someone on the phone. "I don't care what it takes. Find out everything about him, every skeleton in his closet. If he's after my daughter's money, I'll bury him." Celeste pushed the door open without knocking. "Stop it, Dad, right now." William turned, his face flushed with anger. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone before hanging up. "Celeste, good, you're here. We need to contain this situation." "There's no situation to contain," Celeste said, her own anger rising. "Miles and I are friends, maybe more than friends. It's no one's business but ours." "It becomes my business when it threatens the Albright name." William slammed his hand on his desk. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? That you're naive? That he's using you for money or fame? That this whole thing is a publicity stunt?" "I don't care what people are saying. The people who matter know the truth." William shook his head. "You're being played, Celeste. This man, this waiter, he humiliated you publicly and now he's dating you. Can't you see what's happening? He's using you to elevate himself, to get attention." "You don't know him," Celeste said through gritted teeth. "Miles could have sold his story to any tabloid after that video went viral. He could have written a tell-all about our family, about the gala, but he didn't. He's private, principled. He doesn't want attention. Then what does he want? What could a man like that possibly offer someone like you?" The contempt in her father's voice made Celeste's blood boil. "Someone like me? You mean someone shallow? Someone who judges people based on their job or their bank account? Is that who you think I am, Dad? Because if so, you don't know me at all." William's expression hardened. "I know that you are an Albright. That means something in this city, in this country. We have responsibilities, expectations." "No, you have expectations," Celeste interrupted. "Mom would never have reacted like this. She would have wanted me to be happy." "Don't you dare bring your mother into this." William's voice rose. "Eleanor understood DU-Tai tradition. She would be appalled to see you throwing yourself away on some fortune hunter." Celeste stared at her father, suddenly seeing him clearly, a man so consumed by status and appearances that he couldn't recognize genuine connection if it was right in front of him. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "About Mom. About Miles. About me. And I'm done letting you tell me who I should be or who I should care about." She turned to leave, but William's next words stopped her cold. "If you continue seeing this man, I'll cut you off. No more trust fund, no more apartment, no more position at the foundation. You'll be on your own." Celeste looked back at her father, at the man who had shaped her life, who had both protected and controlled her for as long as she could remember. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of his disapproval. "Maybe that's exactly what I need," she said, "to find out who I am without the Albright name and money." She walked out, closing the door quietly behind her, her heart racing, but her mind clearer than it had been in years. Outside, in the cold January air, Celeste pulled out her phone and texted Miles, "Can we move our meeting up? I need to see you tonight." His response came a few minutes later. "I get off work at 9. Meet me at my place?" "I'll be there," she replied, already hailing a cab, already knowing that whatever came next would change everything. The taxi dropped Celeste off in front of Miles's apartment building in Washington Heights. It was a far cry from her luxury high-rise in Tribeca, a pre-war walk-up with a faded awning and security bars on the lower windows. But there was a warmth to it, a sense of community that her building, for all its doormen and amenities, somehow lacked. She checked her phone. 8:45 p.m. Miles wouldn't be home from work for another 15 minutes at least. Celeste hugged her coat tighter and took a seat on the stoop, ignoring the curious glances from neighbors entering and exiting the building. A million thoughts raced through her head. What would she tell Miles about her father's ultimatum? How would he react? Was she crazy to even consider giving up everything for a relationship that was just beginning? At 9:10, she spotted Miles walking down the block, still in his server's uniform under his peacoat. He looked tired, his shoulders slightly slumped, but when he saw her waiting, his whole demeanor changed. He straightened up, his pace quickened, and a small smile appeared on his face. "You're early," he said, climbing the steps to meet her. "I couldn't wait." Celeste stood, suddenly nervous. "Is that okay?" "Of course." Miles unlocked the building door and held it open for her. "Everything all right? Your text seemed urgent." "I'll tell you upstairs," Celeste said, not wanting to get into it in the hallway where neighbors might overhear. They climbed 4 flights of stairs in comfortable silence. Miles's apartment was at the end of a narrow hallway, small but impeccably clean. Bookshelves lined every available wall space, and a desk by the window held a laptop and neat stacks of papers. His writing space, Celeste knew. "Tea?" Miles offered, hanging up his coat. "Please." While Miles filled a kettle in the tiny kitchen, Celeste wandered to his bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines. Many were well-worn paperbacks, classics, contemporary fiction, books of poetry and essays. A framed photo caught her eye, a younger Miles in a cap and gown, standing proudly beside his father, who beamed with pride. Columbia University's gates were visible in the background. "That was graduation day," Miles said, returning with 2 mugs of tea. "One of the best days of my life. My dad was so proud." "He should be," Celeste said, accepting her mug. "Columbia's not easy to get into, let alone graduate from. I had scholarships and worked part-time all through college." Miles gestured for her to sit on the small sofa. "But that's not why you needed to see me tonight, is it?" Celeste took a deep breath. "My father saw the photos of us. He's not happy." Miles's expression darkened. "I figured as much." "What had he say?" "He threatened to cut me off financially if I keep seeing you. No more trust fund, no apartment, no position at the foundation." Celeste stared into her tea, then looked up to meet Miles's eyes. "He thinks you're using me for money or fame." Miles set his mug down with a sharp clink. "And what do you think?" "I think it's ridiculous. I know you, Miles. You're the last person who would use someone. And the ultimatum? Are you going to stop seeing me?" Celeste reached for his hand. "No, that's why I'm here. I wanted you to know that what my father thinks doesn't matter to me. What matters is how I feel when I'm with you. Seen, heard, challenged, real." Miles squeezed her hand, but his expression remained troubled. "Celeste, I can't ask you to give up your whole life, your financial security, your family. You're not asking. I'm choosing." Celeste moved closer to him on the sofa. "For the first time in my life, I'm making a choice based on what I want, not what's expected of me." "And what do you want?" Miles's voice was barely above a whisper. Instead of answering with words, Celeste leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when Miles responded, pulling her closer, the kiss deepened. Everything else fell away. Her father's anger, the tabloid headlines, the uncertainty of the future. There was only this moment, this connection, this man whose words had awakened something in her that had been dormant for too long. When they finally broke apart, Miles rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day at the coffee shop," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" "Because I needed to be sure this was real, that you weren't just atoning for something." Celeste cupped his face in her hands. "This is the most real thing I've ever felt." They spent the rest of the evening talking, planning, sharing their fears and hopes. Miles worried about what the media attention would do to his father, to his privacy. Celeste worried about surviving without the financial safety net she'd always had. "I have some savings," she said. "Not much. I've always been terrible with money because I never had to think about it. But enough to get by for a little while. And then what? You can't live like this, Celeste." Miles gestured around, his modest apartment. "You're used to a certain lifestyle. Maybe it's time I wasn't." She squeezed his hand. "I have a degree in art history that I've never used. Maybe I could actually get a job at a gallery or museum." Just like that. You'd give up everything. Not everything. Just the parts that were never really mine to begin with. Celeste looked around at his small, book-filled apartment. This feels more like home than my place ever has. Miles pulled her into his arms, and they sat in silence for a while, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Finally, Miles spoke, his voice soft against her hair. Whatever you decide, I'm here. But I want you to be sure. Take a few days to think about it. This isn't a decision to make in one night. Celeste nodded, knowing he was right, even as her heart had already decided. The next morning, Celeste returned to her Tribeca apartment to find her best friend Alessandra waiting in the lobby, a concerned expression on her face. "There you are. I've been calling all night." Alessandra pulled her into a tight hug. "Your father called me, said you stormed out after a fight. I was worried." Celeste sighed as they rode the elevator up to her penthouse. "I'm fine, Ali. Just needed some space to think." "Where were you all night?" Alessandra's eyes widened. "Were you with him? With Miles?" "Yes," Celeste said simply, unlocking her apartment door. "And before you ask, yes, it's serious." Inside, Celeste's luxurious apartment felt strangely hollow, like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. The designer furniture, the expensive art, the floor-to-ceiling windows with their spectacular view of the city, none of it felt like hers anymore. "Your father is really upset," Alessandra said, following her to the kitchen. "He called me at midnight asking if I knew where you were." "What did you tell him?" "That I didn't know," which was true. Alessandra leaned against the marble counter. "Cele, what's going on? This isn't like you, defying your father, disappearing for the night." Celeste poured them both coffee from her fancy Italian machine. "Maybe it should be like me. Maybe I've been living someone else's life for too long." She told Alessandra everything, about her father's ultimatum, about her decision to keep seeing Miles regardless of the consequences, about her feelings for him. "Wow," Alessandra said when she finished. "You really love him, don't you?" The word hit Celeste like a physical force. Love. Was that what this was? This feeling of being both completely vulnerable and completely safe at the same time? "I think I do," she admitted, the realization both terrifying and exhilarating. "But it's more than that, Ali. Being with Miles, seeing the world through his eyes, it's changed me. Made me question everything I thought I knew about myself, about what matters." Alessandra took a sip of her coffee, studying Celeste over the rim of the cup. "And you're really willing to give up all this? Your trust fund, this apartment, your position in society?" "I'm willing to find out who I am without those things." Before Alessandra could respond, Celeste's phone rang, her father again. She sent it to voicemail. "You can't avoid him forever," Alessandra said gently. "I know, but I need to figure some things out first." Celeste stared out the window at the city below. "I need to see if I can actually stand on my own 2 feet." Alessandra was quiet for a moment, then said, "My uncle owns a gallery in Soho. He's been looking for an assistant curator. The pay isn't great, but with your art history background..." Celeste turned, surprised. "You'd help me find a job?" "Of course. Tea-hat's what friends do." Alessandra smiled. "Besides, I'm kind of impressed by this new, independent Celeste. I want to see where she goes." The next week was a whirlwind. Celeste interviewed at Alessandra's uncle's gallery and was offered the assistant curator position on the spot, though she suspected her friend's influence had something to do with it. The salary was less than what she spent on shoes in a month, but it was a start. She and Miles continued to meet, though they were more careful now, choosing quiet restaurants and out-of-the-way cafes to avoid the paparazzi. The media frenzy had only intensified after Celeste missed a high-profile charity event, fueling speculation about the seriousness of her relationship with the viral waiter, as the tabloids insisted on calling him. Through it all, Celeste avoided her father's calls and texts, not ready for another confrontation. But she knew she couldn't put it off forever, especially when she received a formal email from the Albright Foundation's board of directors requesting her presence at an emergency meeting. "They're going to remove me from the board," she told Miles over dinner at his apartment. "My father's doing, obviously." Miles set down his fork, his expression troubled. "Are you sure about this, Celeste?" About us, it's all happening so fast. I've never been more sure of anything. She reached across the small table for his hand. The foundation, the social position, they were never really mine, they were my father's, and I was just playing a part. And what about your mother's legacy? You've always said the foundation was part of honoring her memory. Celeste had been thinking about this a lot. My mother cared about helping people, about making a difference. But I think she'd want me to be happy, to be authentic. The foundation will go on without me. Miles squeezed her hand. I just don't want you to have regrets, to wake up one day and resent me for everything you gave up. The only thing I'd regret is not following my heart. Celeste leaned forward. Miles, when you spoke at the gala, you talked about seeing people, really seeing them. You saw me, not the Albright heiress, but me, and I see you. That's worth any sacrifice. Miles's eyes softened and he brought her hand to his lips. I love you, Celeste Albright. I didn't plan to, didn't expect to, but I do. The words filled her with a warmth she'd never experienced before. I love you too. The Albright Foundation had its offices in a sleek, modern building in Midtown. Celeste had visited countless times over the years, but never with the sense of foreboding she felt now as she rode the elevator to the top floor. The boardroom was intimidating by design. All dark wood and leather chairs with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The board members were already seated when Celeste arrived, her father at the head of the table, his expression stony. Celeste, he said, his voice formal, thank you for joining us. She took her usual seat, aware of the curious and judgmental glances from the other board members, all friends of her father, all part of the same elite social circle. I assume this meeting is about me, she said, cutting to the chase, about my relationship with Miles Duval. This meeting, her father said icily, is about the reputation of the Albright Foundation and the responsibilities of its board members. What followed was essentially a public reprimand. William Albright outlined how Celeste's recent behavior had brought unwanted scrutiny to the foundation, how her personal choices had become a distraction from their charitable work. The board has therefore decided, he concluded, that it would be best if you took a leave of absence from your duties, effective immediately. The words stung, even though Celeste had expected them. This foundation had been part of her life since childhood. It bore her mother's maiden name. To be pushed out felt like losing a piece of her identity. But then she thought of Miles, of his dignity in the face of much worse dismissals, and she straightened her spine. I understand, she said calmly, and I accept your decision, but I'd like to say something before I go. Her father looked like he wanted to refuse, but the other board members were watching. He nodded curtly. Celeste stood, addressing the entire table. This foundation was created to help people, to make a difference in their lives. My mother believed in seeing the humanity in everyone, regardless of their status or wealth. But somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. We became more concerned with galas and photo ops than with the people we claimed to serve. She looked directly at her father now. Miles Duval is a Columbia graduate, a published writer, a son caring for his ailing father. He is kind, intelligent, and more dignified than anyone in this room. The fact that you can only see his job title, that you dismiss him as just a waiter, says more about you than it does about him. William's face flushed with anger, but Celeste continued, her voice steady. I'm not just taking a leave of absence. I'm resigning from the board effective immediately, and I'll be declining any further financial support from the Albright family. It's time I made my own way, on my own terms. She gathered her things and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back one last time. I hope someday you'll understand that this isn't about rejecting our family legacy. It's about honoring it in a way that would make Mom truly proud. With that, she walked out, her heart racing but her mind calm. It was done. She had cut the cord. Whatever came next, he would face it on her own terms. News of Celeste's resignation spread quickly through New York's elite circles. Some praised her independence, others whispered that she'd lost her mind. The tabloids had a field day. "Iris gives up millions for waiter romance," screamed one headline. Miles was horrified when he read the stories. "This is exactly what I didn't want," he told Celeste when they met at their favorite coffee shop. "For you to become a specter, Clee, for our relationship to be reduced to some Cinderella story." "It'll die down," Celeste assured him, though she wasn't entirely convinced. "They'll find some other scandal to focus on soon enough." But the media frenzy only intensified when Celeste moved out of her Tribeca penthouse and into a modest one-bedroom in Brooklyn that she could afford on her gallery salary. Photographers camped outside both her new apartment and Miles's place in Washington Heights, making it difficult for them to see each other without being followed. The pressure began to take its toll, especially on Miles. He was a private person by nature, uncomfortable with the attention, resentful of being reduced to the waiter in every headline. "I can't even visit my father without reporters trying to get a quote," he told Celeste one evening when they managed to meet at his apartment, having snuck in through a service entrance to avoid the paparazzi. "The nurses say it's upsetting him, all these strangers asking questions about me, about us." Celeste felt a stab of guilt. "I'm so sorry, Miles. This is all because of me, because of my name." "It's not your fault," Miles said, but his voice was tired. "It's just not what I wanted for either of us." A week later, a new complication arose. Celeste was at the gallery, setting up for a new exhibition, when Alessandra burst in, looking frantic. "Have you seen this?" She thrust her phone at Celeste. It was an article from a major news website. The headline made Celeste's blood run cold. "Exclusive: the truth about Miles Duval, the waiter who stole an heiress's heart." The article was a detailed profile of Miles, his childhood in Harlem, his scholarship to Columbia, his early literary success. But it also contained private details about his father's illness, about the financial struggles that had forced Miles to take service jobs. Most disturbingly, it included quotes from an anonymous source close to the family that painted a picture of Miles as opportunistic, using his relationship with Celeste to revive his stalled writing career. "My father," Celeste said, her voice hollow. "This has his fingerprints all over it." She tried calling Miles immediately, but he didn't answer. She texted, called again, nothing. Finally, she left work Earl Y and went straight to his apartment, only to find the door answered by his roommate, Ricky. "He's not here," Ricky said, looking uncomfortable. "He got a call from the care facility. His dad had some kind of episode. They think it was triggered by all the reporters showing up asking questions. Miles went there right away." Celeste felt sick. "Which hospital? I need to go to him." Ricky hesitated. "Look, I don't think that's a good idea. He was pretty upsetty and he kind of blamed the situation on your relationship. Or the attention, you know?" The words hit Celeste like a physical blow. "He said that?" "Not in so many words, but yeah." Ricky looked genuinely sorry. "Maybe give him some space. Let him deal with his dad." Numb, Celeste retreated to her Brooklyn apartment, where she spent the night staring at her phone, waiting for a call or text from Miles that never came. The next day passed in a similar fog of worry and guilt. By the evening of the second day, she couldn't take it anymore. She called the care facility directly, only to be told that Leonard Duval had been transferred to Mount Sinai Hospital after a suspected minor stroke. Without hesitating, Celeste grabbed her coat and headed for the hospital. Family only or not, she needed to see Miles, to make sure he was okay, to apologize for the chaos her life had brought to his. Mount Sinai was bustling even in the evening hours. Celeste made her way to the information desk, where a tired-looking nurse directed her to the neurological unit on the 5th floor. As she stepped off the elevator, she spotted Miles immediately, sitting alone in a small waiting area, his head in his hands. "Miles," she said softly, approaching him. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion, or tears, or both. For a moment, his face registered surprise, then softened at the sight of her. But quickly a guard went up, a distance she hadn't seen since their earliest encounters. "Celeste, how did you find me?" "I called the care facility. They told me your father had been transferred here." She sat beside him, aching to take his hand, but sensing his withdrawal. How is he? Stable. It was a mild stroke, probably triggered by stress. Miles's voice was flat. The doctors say he'll recover, but it was a close call. I'm so sorry, Miles. About the article, about the reporters harassing your father. It's not your fault, Miles interrupted, but his tone suggested otherwise. It's just this whole situation. It's exactly what I feared would happen. We can fix this, Celeste said desperately. I can talk to my father, make him stop feeding information to the press. We can be more careful, more private. It's not that simple. Miles finally looked at her directly, his eyes pained. Your father had me investigated, Celeste. He dug into my past, my family's past. The article barely scratched the surface of what he found. Celeste felt cold. What do you mean? What else could there be? Miles was quiet for a long moment. My mother left when I was 3. She had addiction issues, ended up on the streets. She died of an overdose when I was in high school. His voice was steady but strained. Your father found her police record, her history. The article didn't mention her, but the reporter hinted they had more information they were choosing not to publish at this time. That's blackmail, Celeste whispered, horrified. That's protecting the Albright name, Miles corrected bitterly. Your father made it clear, if I continue seeing you, the next article won't be so flattering. They'll drag my mother's memory through the mud, embarrass my father, destroy whatever professional reputation I might still have. He can't do that, Celeste said, though she knew full well her father was capable of exactly that kind of cruelty. He already has. Miles rubbed his eyes wearily. And the worst part is, he's right about one thing. This relationship is hurting my father. The stress of the media attention, the questions, the scrutiny, it triggered his stroke. The doctors confirmed it. Celeste felt tears welling in her eyes. So what are you saying? That we should stop seeing each other? Miles was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the floor. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a resignation that broke Celeste's heart. I think we need to be realistic about what's happening here, he said quietly. You gave up your family, your inheritance, your position, all for me. What happens when the novelty wears off? When you realize that life without wealth and privilege isn't romantic or exciting, it's just hard. That's not fair, Celeste protested. I love you, Miles. This isn't about novelty or rebellion. Maybe not consciously, but Celeste, look at us. He gestured between them. We come from completely different worlds. I can't give you the life you're used to. And now, because of our relationship, my father is lying in a hospital bed. So you're ending this? Just like that? Miles reached for her hand, and Celeste E. felt a surge of hope. But his touch was gentle, final, a goodbye, not a reconciliation. I think we need to take a step back, give each other space to figure out what we really want, what we're really willing to sacrifice. His voice broke slightly. I love you, Celeste, but love isn't always enough. Sometimes timing and circumstances matter too. Celeste felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. After everything she'd given up, after all the ways she'd changed, Miles was pulling away. And the worst part was, she understood why. Her father's tactics, the media circus, the impact on Leonard's health, it was all too much, too fast. How much space? She asked, her voice small. How much time? Miles shook his head. I don't know. I need to focus on my father right now, on getting him stable and move to a better facility, one with more privacy. And you need to figure out if this new life you've chosen is really what you want, without the pressure of our relationship complicating things. It was the most painful conversation of Celeste's life, sitting in that sterile hospital waiting room, feeling the connection between them fraying with each word. When she finally left, Miles didn't walk her out. He simply kissed her forehead, whispered, I'm sorry, and returned to his father's room. Outside the hospital, Celeste stood on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face, unsure where to go or what to do next. She had given up everything for love, only to find that love wasn't immune to the pressures of the real world, to family obligations and public scrutiny, and the weight of different expectations. For the first time in her life, Celeste Albright was truly alone. No family support, no boyfriend, nothing but her own determination and the faint hope that somehow, someday, she and Miles might fiend their way back to each other. As she hailed a taxi back to her Brooklyn apartment, Celeste made a silent promise to herself. She would prove to Miles, to her father, and most importantly to herself, that her transformation was real. That she could stand on her own 2 feet, that she was more than just an Albright heiress playing at independence. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying her toward an uncertain future, one she would have to build entirely on her own. 3 months passed. Spring arrived in New York City, cherry blossoms dotting the parks with delicate pink, but Celeste barely noticed. Her days had fallen into a new routine: work at the gallery, her small apartment, occasional dinners with Alessandra. No galas, no charity boards, no family obligations, and no Miles. She had respected his request for space, though it pained her daily. She hadn't called or texted, hadn't gone by his apartment tea or the restaurant where he worked, but she thought about him constantly, wondering if he was okay, if his father had recovered, if he ever thought about her too. The media circus had gradually died down once they stopped being seen together. Occasionally, Celeste would spot a tabloid with a small story speculating about their breakup, but without new photos or drama to fuel the fire, the public had moved on to fresher scandals. Celeste had thrown her CLF into her work at the gallery, arriving early and staying late, learning everything she could about art curation, sales, and management. To her surprise, she discovered she had a genuine talent for it, an eye for emerging artists, a knack for matching collectors with works they would love, a passion for promoting artists from diverse backgrounds. "You're my best employee," Alessandra's uncle Giorgio told her one evening as they closed up after a successful exhibition opening. "I had my doubts when Ali first recommended you, thought you'd be some spoiled rich girl playing at having a job. But you've proven me wrong." Celeste smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." "The Westwood collector was impressed with your knowledge of contemporary sculpture," Giorgio continued. "He's invited us to preview his private collection. Could be a big opportunity for the gallery." "That's wonderful," Celeste said, though her enthusiasm felt hollow. Professional success meant little when her personal life felt so empty. Later that night, in her small Brooklyn apartment, Celeste scrolled through her phone for the 100th time, lingering over old photos of her and Miles. She wondered if 3 months qualified as his space, or if reaching out would only push him further away. Her phone rang, startling her. It was Alessandra. "Turn on Channel 7 now," her friend said without preamble. Confused, Celeste found her remote and switched on the small TV she rarely used. The local news was just ending, transitioning to a late-night talk show. The host, a popular comedian known for his sharp interviews, was introducing his next guest. "Tonight, we're joined by Miles Duval, whose speech at the Albright Winter Gala went viral earlier this year. He's here to discuss his new essay collection, Seen and Unseen, Dubojcic publishes next week. Please welcome Miles Duval." Celeste gasped as Miles walked onto the stage, looking handsome and confident in a navy suit she'd never seen before. The audience applauded warmly. Clearly, many recognized him from the viral video. "Miles," she whispered, touching the screen. The interview began casually, with the host asking about Miles's background and education. Miles spoke eloquently about growing up in Harlem, about his father's influence, about his time at Columbia. "And then life took a turn," the host prompted. "Your father's health declined." "Yes," Miles said, his voice steady. "He had a stroke 3 years ago. I had to put my writing career on hold to care for him, to pay the medical bills. I took whatever jobs I could find, including waiting tables at high-end events. Like the Albright Gala," the host supplied. Miles nodded. "Like the Albright Gala." "Where you gave a speech that changed your life," the host continued. "Tell us about that night." Miles was quiet for a moment, and Celeste held her breath. "I wasn't planning to speak," he finally said. "But there was a moment, a comment made about me being just a waiter, nothing worth noting, that touched a nerve. Not just for myself, but for everyone who's ever been dismissed based on their job, their appearance, their circumstances. The speech went viral. You became some TD. Came King of a celebrity overnight. Miles smiled ruefully. Not by choice. I've always been a private person. The attention was overwhelming. And then there was your relationship with Celeste Albright, the very woman who had dismissed you, the host said, leaning forward eagerly. That must have been quite a plot twist. Celeste tensed, waiting for Miles's response. Celeste, Miles said, his voice softening, is a remarkable person who had the courage to question everything she'd been taught, to see beyond her privileged bubble. Our relationship wasn't the scandal people made it out to be. It was two people recognizing something in each other, challenging each other to be better. But it ended, the host pressed. The tabloids reported a breakup months ago. Miles's expression grew serious. What ended was the media circus, the public spectacle. The constant scrutiny was harming my father's health, invading our privacy. We needed space from that. He didn't explicitly confirm or deny that they had broken up, Celeste noted. What did that mean? Your new book, the host continued, holding up a copy with a simple, elegant cover, has been described as a meditation on visibility, class, and connection. How much of it was inspired by your experience with Celeste Albright? Miles shifted in his seat. The collection includes the full text of my speech from the gala, plus essays I've written over the past few years about being seen versus being viewed, about the masks we wear in different contexts, about what we owe to each other as human beings. You didn't answer my question, the host pointed out. Miles smiled slightly. Let's say that knowing Celeste changed my perspective in ways I'm still discovering. She taught me that visibility goes both ways, that sometimes the person in the spotlight is as unseen as the person in the shadows. The interview continued, but Celeste barely registered the rest. She was too busy replaying Miles's words, searching for clues about his feelings, about where they stood. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alessandra. Did you know about this, the book? No idea, Celeste replied. We haven't spoken in months. The interview ended and the show cut to commercial. Celeste turned of F the TV, her mind racing. Miles had published a book. He was back to writing. And he'd spoken about her with such tenderness. Without thinking, she dialed his number, then quickly hung up before it could ring. What would she even say? Congratulations on the book? I miss you. Why didn't you tell me? She paced her small living room, debating her next move. Should she respect his need for space, or was this a sign that he was ready to reconnect? She was still deliberating when her phone rang. Miles's name flashed on the screen. Celeste's heart leaped into her throat. She answered with trembling hands. Hello? Celeste. His voice was warm, familiar. I saw your call. I hope it's okay that I called back. Yes, of course. She sank onto her sofa, suddenly weak-kneed. I just saw your interview. I had no idea about the book. I wanted to tell you, Miles said. So many times. But I wasn't sure if enough to me had passed, if you'd even want to hear from me. I've wanted to hear from you every day, Celeste admitted, her voice catching. I've respected your need for space, but it's been hard. For me too, Miles said softly. Harder than I expected. A silence stretched between them, filled with 3 months of unspoken words. How's your father? Celeste finally asked. Better. We moved him to a new facility in New Jersey, more privacy, better care. He asks about you sometimes. He does? He liked you, said you had kind eyes. Miles paused. How are you, Celeste? Really? I'm okay, working at the gallery, learning to live on a normal person's salary. She laughed lightly. My apartment is tiny and I've discovered I'm a terrible cook. I'd like to see it, Miles said. Your apartment, if that's something you'd be open to. Celeste's heart raced. I'd like that when? How about tomorrow? I could bring dinner. Save you from your own cooking. Tomorrow is perfect. They talked for another hour, catching up on the small details of their lives during their separation. Miles told her about the book deal, which had come through a literary agent who had seen the viral video and tracked him down. The advance had been enough to move his father to the better facility and allow Miles to cut back on his serving jobs to focus on writing. It's ironic, he said. That speech was prompted by feeling invisible, dismissed. but it ended up making me more visible than I ever wanted to be. Do you regret it? Celeste asked. The speech, everything that followed. Miles was quiet for a moment. Not the speech, not meeting you. Just the way everything exploded, the way it affected my father, the way it forced us apart when we were just beginning. We could begin again, Celeste suggested, barely daring to hope. With her at the media circus this time. I'd like that, Miles said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Let's talk more tomorrow. It's getting late, and I have a feeling we both have a lot to think about. After they hung up, Celeste hugged her phone to her chest, a cautious joy spreading through her. It wasn't a reconciliation yet, but it was a start, a second chance. Miles arrived at Celeste's Brooklyn apartment the next evening, carrying takeout from her favorite Ethiopian restaurant and a wrapped package that she suspected was his book. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the door, suddenly nervous. But the moment she saw him, really saw him, standing there in jeans and a button-down shirt, his smile warm and slightly nervous too, all her anxiety melted away. Without thinking, she stepped forward and hugged him. After a brief hesitation, his arms wrapped around her, and they stood in her doorway, holding each other as if no time had passed at all. Come in, she said finally, reluctantly breaking the embrace. Let me give you the grand tour. It'll take about 10 seconds. Miles laughed as he followed her into the small apartment. It was a far cry from her Tribeca penthouse, just a living room with a kitchenette, a bedroom, and a tiny bathroom. But Celeste had made it hers, with art from the gallery on the walls, books stacked on every surface, and a vase of fresh flowers on the coffee table. It's nice, Miles said, looking around. Cozy. It feels like you. Thanks. It's not much, but it's mine. Truly mine, not paid for by my father. They set up dinner on her small dining table, and as they ate, the initial awkwardness faded. It felt like old times, like the easy conversations they'd had before everything had become so complicated. I brought you something, Miles said when they'd finished eating. He handed her the wrapped package. Celeste carefully removed the paper to reveal a hardcover copy of Seen and Unseen by Miles Duval. The cover was simple but striking, a silhouette of a person that, depending on how you looked at it, was either emerging from or disappearing into a crowd. It's beautiful, she said, running her fingers over the embossed title. Open it, Miles urged. She did, finding a handwritten inscription on the title page. To Celeste, who taught me that being truly seen is the greatest privilege of all. With love, Miles. Tears pricked at her eyes. With love? Miles reached across the table to take her hand. Yes, that never changed, Celeste. Even when everything else was falling apart, that remained true. For me too, she whispered. I never stopped loving you, Miles. Not for a day, not for a moment. He squeezed her hand. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that what we had wasn't real, that it was built on unusual circumstances, on drama and defiance. I needed to know that I could stand on my own, that I could be Miles Duval, the writer, not just the viral waiter or Celeste Albright's boyfriend. And now, Celeste asked, her heart in her throat, now I know who I am. I've found my voice again. And I've realized that the connection we had wasn't about scandal or rebellion. It was about seeing each other, truly seeing each other when no one else did. Miles stood and pulled Celeste to her feet, drawing her close. I've missed you, he said softly. Every day. I've missed you too, she replied, tilting her face up to his. So much. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long journey, familiar and new all at once, a recognition and a discovery. Whatever had broken between them seemed to heal in that moment, as if the time apart had been necessary for them to find their way back to each other, stronger and more certain. Later, curled together on her small sofa, Celeste asked the question that had been on her mind all evening. What happens now, with us? Miles brushed a strand of hair from her face. We take it one day at a time. We build something real away from the spotlight. We figure out who we are together, not as characters in some tabloid story. I'd like that, Celeste said, resting her head on his shoulder. No pressure, no expectations, just us. There is one thing, though, Miles said hesitantly. A favor I need to ask you. Anything. I've been invited to give a talk at a literary festival next month. It's a big opportunity, a national stage. They want me to speak about the themes in my book, about visibility and voice and crossing boundaries. Miles, that's amazing. Celeste sat up, excited for him. Of course that's not a favor. I'm so proud of you. The favor is, Miles took a deep breath. I want you to be there, not just in the audience, but with me, on stage. Celeste blinked, surprised. Me? Why? Because our story isn't just mine to tell, it's yours too, and I think there's power in us telling it together. In showing that people can change, can grow, can see beyond their bubbles. The request took Celeste by surprise. After months of avoiding the public eye, the thought of stepping onto a stage was daunting. But there was something right about it too, about owning their narrative, about transforming what had been a spectacle into something meaningful. I'm not a public speaker, she said uncertainly. Not like you. You don't have to be. Just be yourself, the real Celeste, the one I've come to love. The one who had the courage to question everything she'd been taught. Celeste thought about it, about what it would mean to stand beside Miles, to tell their story on their own terms. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. For us. Miles's face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip. Really? Really. But I have a condition of my own. What's that? Before the festival, I want you to meet with my father. Miles's smile faded. Your father? Celeste. He tried to destroy me, to separate us. I know, she said quickly. And I'm not asking for a reconciliation, but I think, for us to truly move forward, there needs to be some kind of resolution, some acknowledgement of what happened. Miles was quiet, considering. And you think he'd agree to meet? I don't know, but I'd like to try. Celeste took Miles's hands in hers. These past months without you, without my family, they've taught me a lot about what matters, about forgiveness, not for the other person's sake, but for your own peace. I can't promise I'll forgive him, Miles said honestly, but I'll meet with him for you, for us. Celeste kissed him gratefully. That's all I'm asking. Just a meeting. Whatever happens after that, we'll face it together. Arranging the meeting with her father was harder than Celeste had anticipated. William Albright had not reached out to her once during their estrangement, his pride apparently preventing him from making the first move. When she finally called him, his secretary Initial Y tried to block the call, not recognizing her voice. A small but painful reminder of how completely she had been cut off from her former life. But eventually William agreed to see them, not at his home or office but on neutral ground, at an upscale restaurant in Midtown. Celeste suspected he chose the public location to prevent any heated exchanges. Are you sure about this? Miles asked as they approached the restaurant, both dressed formally for the OCC Asian. We can still back out. Celeste squeezed his hand. I'm sure. Whatever happens, we face it together, remember? William Albright was already seated when they arrived, looking impeccable as always in a tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. But Celeste noticed immediately that he looked older, more tired than she remembered. Had their estrangement affected him more than he let on? Celeste, he said, standing as they approached. His eyes flicked to Miles, his expression unreadable. Mr. Duval. Dad, Celeste replied, leaning in to kiss his cheek, a gesture that seemed to surprise him. Thank you for agreeing to meet us. They sat down, an uncomfortable silence settling over the table, until a waiter, an actual waiter, Celeste thought with a touch of irony, came to take their drink orders. Miles ordered sparkling water, and Celeste did the same. William asked for a scotch, neat. You're lucky. Nung well? William said to Celeste after the waiter left. The gallery job must agree with you. It does, Celeste said, surprised that he knew about her work. I've learned a lot. We just signed 2 new artists who I think have real potential. William nodded, then turned his attention to Miles. I've seen the publicity for your book. Quite an achievement. Thank you, Miles said, his tone civil but cautious. Another silence fell, heavier this time. Celeste looked between the two men in her life, both proud, both stubborn, both important to her in very different ways. This isn't easy for any of us, she finally said, but I asked for this meeting because I believe we need to clear the air, to find a way forward. William took a sip of his scotch. And what does a way forward look like to you, Celeste? I don't know exactly, she admitted, but it starts with acknowledgement. Dad, what you did, having Miles investigated, threatening to expose private details about his family, pressuring him through his father's illness, it was wrong. William's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I was protecting you, protecting our family name. No, Celeste said firmly, you were controlling me, there's a difference. Your relationship became a media circus, William countered. It was affecting the foundation, our reputation, a foundation I'm no longer part of, Celeste reminded him. A reputation I no longer benefit from. You made sure of that when you cut me off. William flinched slightly, the first crack in his composed facade. You gave me no choice. There's always a choice, Miles said quietly. Both Albrights turned to look at him. That's what my father always taught me. No matter the circumstances, we choose how to respond. We choose who we want to be. William studied Miles for a long moment. And who do you want to be, Mr. Duval? The man who took my daughter away from her family? From her birthright? I didn't take Celeste away from anything, Miles said evenly. She made her own choices. Choices you should be proud of, not resentful of. She chose authenticity over privilege, substance over status. She chose to see people, really see them, instead of judging them by their job title or bank account. And you think that's enough? William asked. Authentic. ICT doesn't pay bills. It doesn't provide security. I'm doing fine, Dad, Celeste interjected. I pay my own rent. I buy my own groceries. Yes, my apartment is tiny, and I can't afford designer clothes anymore, but I'm happy. Genuinely happy. William looked skeptical. For now, perhaps. But what about the future? What happens when the novelty wears off? This isn't about novelty, Celeste said, frustration creeping into her voice. It's about growth. About becoming my own person. With him, William said, nodding toward Miles. Yes, with Miles. But also for myself. Celeste leaned forward. Dad, I didn't come here to ask for your money back or to pretend the last few months never happened. I came because, despite everything, you're still my father, and life is too short for this kind of estrangement. Something in her words seemed to reach William. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Your Mo there would say the same thing, he admitted quietly. She always believed in reconciliation, in second chances. She also believed in seeing the best in people, Celeste said gently. In looking beyond appearances. William was silent for a moment, swirling his scotch. Then he looked directly at Miles. My investigators found nothing truly damaging about you, Mr. Duval. That's why we never published the more personal details. Your mother's struggles, your father's financial difficulties, none of it reflected poorly on your character. In fact, quite the opposite. It was as close to an apology as William Albright was likely to give, Celeste realized. And judging by Miles's surprised expression, he understood that too. Thank you for saying that, Miles said, his voice genuine. My father has suffered enough. He doesn't deserve to have his life or my mother's memory exploited. No, he doesn't, William agreed. He hesitated, then added, How is he doing? I understand he had another stroke. He's better, Miles said, clearly surprised by the question. The new facility has been good for him. The book advance helped with that. William nodded, then turned back to Celeste. I saw the announcement that you'll be appearing with Miles at the literary festival next month. It was Celeste's turn to be surprised. Her father was keeping tabs on her public appearances. Yes, we'll be discussing the themes of Miles's book, about visibility and voice and second chances. William was quiet again, seemingly wrestling with something internally. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table to Celeste. "What's this?" she asked, not touching it. "Not what you think," William said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "It's not a check. Open it." Cautiously, Celeste Pye caked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a formal letter on Albright Foundation letterhead. She read it quickly, her eyes widening. "The foundation is launching a new initiative," William explained as she read. "A scholarship program for underprivileged students pursuing careers in writing and journalism. We're calling it the Eleanor Albright Memorial Scholarship, after your mother." Celeste looked up, stunned. "This says, you want me to chair the selection committee?" William nodded. "If you're interested. It would be a part-time commitment, something you could do alongside your gallery work. You'd have complete autonomy over the selections." It was a peace offering, Celeste realized. Not a demand that she return to the fold, but an acknowledgement of her independence, coupled with an invitation to reconnect on new terms. "I'd like that," she said, emotion tightening her throat. "Thank you, Dad." Liam turned to Miles. "We'd also like to invite you to give a talk to the scholarship recipients each year, about finding your voice, about perseverance, if you're willing." Miles looked genuinely moved by the offer. "I'd be honored," he said after a moment. "Thank you." The tension that had filled the table at the beginning of the meal had dissipated, replaced by a cautious optimism. They weren't a family, not yet, maybe not ever in the traditional sense, but they had found a way to move forward, to acknowledge each other's value, to begin building something new from the ashes of what had broken. As they parted outside the restaurant, William surprised both Celeste and Miles by extending his hand to Miles. "Take care of each other," he said simply. "That's all any parent really wants for their child, someone who sees them for who they truly are." Miles shook his hand firmly. "I do see her," he promised, "and I always will." The day of the literary festival arrived crisp and clear, a perfect early summer day. The event was being held in a grand hall in Manhattan, with hundreds of attendees expected for the main stage presentations. Backstage, Celeste paced nervously, smoothing her simple but elegant dress, while Miles reviewed his notes one last time. They had prepared for this moment, had practiced what they would say, how they would tell their story. But still, the thought of facing such a large audience made Celeste's stomach churn. "What if I freeze?" she whispered to Miles. "What if I say the wrong thing?" Miles set down his notes and took her hands. "You won't. And even if you do, it doesn't matter. We're not there to be perfect. We're there to be real, to be honest. That's all anyone can ask." Celeste nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. In the past few weeks, since their reconciliation and the meeting with her father, they had grown even closer. Miles had started spending more nights at her Brooklyn apartment than at his own place. They had talked about finding a new place together, something that would be truly theirs, not his or hers. They had also visited Leonard together several times. High-S health had stabilized, and he seemed genuinely happy to see Celeste again, his eyes lighting up when she brought him new books to read. 5 minutes, a stage manager called, peering into their waiting area. Celeste took a deep breath. "Ready?" Miles smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had first captured her heart. "With you? Always." They walked hand in hand to the side of the stage, where they could hear the moderator introducing them. "Our next SB-Akers need little introduction," the moderator was saying. "Miles Duval, author of the best-selling essay collection Seen and Unseen, and Celeste Albright, former socialite turned gallery curator. Their story began with a viral moment at a high society gala and evolved into something none of us could have predicted. Please welcome Miles Duval and Celeste Albright." The audience erupted in applause as Miles and Celeste walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, the crowd a sea of faces, but Celeste felt surprisingly calm with Miles beside her. They took their seats in comfortable armchairs, arranged for the conversation-style presentation. "Thank you both for being here," the moderator began. "Miles, your book has struck a chord with readers across the country. What inspired you to write it?" Miles glanced at Celeste before answering. "Life inspired me. Specifically, a moment when I was made to feel invisible and my response to that feeling. But the book isn't just about that one moment or speech. It's about all the ways we see and don't see each other, all the assumptions we make based on appearances, all the barriers we create between ourselves and others. Celeste, the moderator turned to her. You were part of that initial moment. The person who, as Miles put it in his viral speech, dismissed him as just a waiter, nothing worth noting. I'd like to hear those words repeated back to you, to know that a thoughtless comment led to all of this. Celeste felt a flutter of anxiety, but Miles's presence beside her gave her courage. It's humbling, she said honestly. Embarrassing, certainly, but also illuminating. That comment, which I wish I could take back but can't, revealed something about who I was at that time. Someone who judged others based on their job, their status, their usefulness to me. I'm not proud of that person, but I'm grateful for the wake-up call that allowed me to change. The moderator nodded encouragingly. And Miles, what made you decide to speak up that night, to step forward and tell your story when you could have simply continued serving drinks? Miles considered this. Dignity, he said finally. Not just my own, but the dignity of everyone who's ever been overlooked or underestimated. My father, who was a high school principal for 30 years before a stroke changed his life, always taught me that our dignity isn't something others can take away. Only we can surrender it. That night I chose not to surrender it. The conversation continued, touching on themes from Miles's book, on their unlikely relationship, on the media frenzy that had followed. They spoke honestly about the challenges they had faced, about the pressure that had temporarily driven them apart, about Findy, nung their way back to each other. There's a line in your book, the moderator said to Miles, where you write, "True visibility isn't about being seen by many, but being truly seen by one." Can you talk about what that means to you? Miles looked at Celeste, his eyes soft with affection. It means that fame or notoriety isn't the same as being seen. I became visible when that video went viral. Suddenly everyone knew my name, my face, but most of those people weren't seeing me. They were seeing a symbol, a character in a drama they'd constructed. He reached for Celeste's hand, but there was one person who began to truly see me, not as the waiter or the viral sensation, but as Miles, a writer, a son, a man with dreams and fears and flaws. And in turn, I began to truly see her, not as an Albright heiress, but as Celeste, complex, courageous, capable of growth and change. Celeste squeezed his hand, emotion welling in her throat. Being truly seen is terrifying, she added. It means being vulnerable, being honest about who you are, the good and the bad. But it's also the greatest gift we can give each other. To say, I see you, all of you, and you matter. The moderator turned to the audience. We have time for a few questions. Several hands went up. The moderator pointed to an older woman in the front row. This is for Celeste, the woman said. You gave UP a fortune, a privileged position to pursue this relationship. Do you ever regret it? Celeste smiled. Not for a moment. What I gave up was external, money, status, comfort. What I gained was internal, authenticity, independence, love. I won't pretend it was easy. Learning to live on a normal salary, to pay my own bills, to cook my own meals, there was definitely a learning curve. The audience chuckled. But I discovered something important, Celeste continued. Privilege isn't just about wealth or status. It's also about being insulated from reality, from consequences, from growth. In giving up financial privilege, I gained the privilege of discovering who I really am and what I'm capable of. Another audience member, a young man, was called on next. Miles, in your book, you talk about the thin line between having everything and having to fight for anything. Can you elaborate on that? Miles nodded. We like to think the world is divided into distinct categories, the haves and have-nots, the privileged and the struggling. But the truth is that line is much thinner than we realize. A medical emergency, a market crash, a scandal, and suddenly someone who never had to worry is desperate. Or conversely, a viral moment, a lucky break, a helping hand, and someone who was invisible becomes influential. He glanced at Celeste. Understanding that thinness, that fragility breeds empathy. It reminds us that our circumstances don't define us. Our choices do. The questions continued, thoughtful and engaging. Celeste found herself relaxing into the conversation, surprised by her own eloquence, by how naturally she and Miles complemented each other on stage. When the moderator announced the final question, Celeste felt a twinge of regret that their time was ending. The last question came from a middle-aged woman near the back. "This is for both of you. What's next? For your relationship, for your careers, for your story?" Miles and Celeste exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. "We're taking it one day at a time," Miles said. "I'm working on a new book, a novel this time. Celeste is developing an exhibition featuring artists from underrepresented communities. And we're looking for an apartment together," Celeste added, smiling at the ripple of approval from the audience. "Something that's truly ours, not his or mine." "But the most exciting thing," Miles continued, "is a joint project we're developing with the Albright Foundation. A writing program for high school students from disadvantaged backgrounds, focusing on personal narrative as a tool for change." This was news to the moderator, who leaned forward with interest. "So you've reconciled with your family, Celeste?" "We're working on it," Celeste said honestly. "Like any relationship, it takes time, effort, and mutual respect. But we're finding common ground in wanting to create opportunities for others, in using privilege, whether it's wealth or platform or education, to lift others up rather than to separate ourselves." The moderator nodded, then turned to address the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. Please join me in thanking Miles Duval and Celeste Albright for this power-fueled conversation." The applause was thunderous as Miles and Celeste stood, hands clasped together. They bowed slightly, overwhelmed by the response. As they prepared to leave the stage, Miles leaned close to Celeste's ear. "Will you tell this one with me?" he whispered, echoing the words from her original vision of this moment. Tears of joy sprang to Celeste's eyes as she nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind his question. This wasn't just about T.O. Day's talk, it was about their future, about continuing to tell their story together, in whatever form it might take. "Always," she whispered back. Hand in hand, they walked off the stage and into the wings, where they shared a quick, tender kiss away from the audience's eyes. "You were amazing out there," Miles said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We were amazing," Celeste corrected him. "Together." A staff member approached to lead them to the book signing area, where a long line of readers already waited. But before they stepped back into the public eye, Miles pulled Celeste close for one more private moment. "I love you," he said simply. "Not the heiress, not the socialite, just you, Celeste." "And I love you," she replied. "Not the waiter, not the writer, just you, Miles." In that moment, standing in the dim backstage area of a literary festival, they were simply two people who had found each other against all odds. Two people who had taught each other the most important lesson of all, that being truly seen with all your flaws and strengths, your past and your potential, was the greatest privilege anyone could hope for. And as they stepped forward to greet their readers, to sign books and shake hands and continue sharing their story, they did so not as characters in some fairy tale of class and redemption, but as partners in a journey that was still unfolding, still being written, one day at a time. Together, the end